Good morning, everyone. Just to say, we're starting in just a few minutes. If you're watching us online, please be patient. We'll be launching our whistle stop tour in just a few minutes. Thank you very much. Dear Minister, dear Commissioner, dear European coordinators, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Matthew Baldwin. I'm the Deputy Director General of DG Move. And if I could just say a personal word, how wonderful this is to be here together in person. I don't know about you, but it's the first conference that I've attended since the pandemic. And I had to remember this morning to put on not just a shirt and a tie, but also a pair of trousers. And here we are in this extraordinary location. If you're watching online, you're also very, very welcome to be with us. Just to let you know where we are. We are here today at EMSA, the European Maritime Safety Agency. And just to make you doubly jealous, we're in an office overlooking a magnificent Tagus River right at the heart of Lisbon here in Portugal. But just to make you feel a little bit better, you can still be in your pajamas while we're all wearing suit and tie. And we're also locked, socially distanced in a basement cellar here at EMSA. We can't see the Tagus River from where we are. It's a very beautiful basement cellar, and it's very important so we can focus on our work here this morning. It's a great honor for me to be asked to moderate today's launch event for the Connecting Europe Express. If you've been on another planet, you might not know that today's the day for the Connecting Europe Express, the flagship, or should I say the flag train of the European Year of Rail 2021. Today's the day for the Grand Départ. Today we leave Lisbon this afternoon on a long and winding road, a whistle-stop tour of Europe with plenty of time for whistling and stop. In fact, we will be visiting 26 countries in 36 days, and today is also now is the moment to pay tribute and thank so many people, including so many in this room, who've made this incredible trip happen. But I have a question for you. Here we are gathered here together this morning to talk about high-speed rail, of which more in a moment. I'd just like to point out that Jules Verne went around the whole world in 80 days, and we're just going to manage 26 countries in 36 days. Are we really trying to compete with aviation, or are we competing with a hot air balloon? That's my question to you. Anyway, be that as it may, today's session is indeed intended to look at high-speed rail, to look at a number of issues of vital importance for the rail sector. We will zoom in on, and that's my last reference to Zoom, I promised you this morning. We will zoom in particular, on high-speed rail and city-to-city connections, looking both at infrastructure and the services we offer to passengers. I can't wait to get started. So I'm delighted now to give the floor to Maja Markovic, the Executive Director of EMSA, to say a few welcome words. And it gives me the chance to thank you, Maja, and all your amazing team here at EMSA for helping us put this on. Maja, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear Commissioner, dear Director General, dear Minister, Deputy Director General. Welcome to EMSA. It is so great to see so many people finally after months and months of our empty space. Today is the day of celebration, and we are focusing on railway. And as I said, our conference center is full, finally again. Having all of you gathered here today to mark the departure of this very special train that will visit EU capitals and other places is really a pleasure. This is the strength being a part of the EU wider family. You are always at home, even away from home, when you meet with people and share the same values, the same commitment, and the same vision. Maritime transport and railways have indeed some commonalities. Just to name a few, for years, these modes of transport have been considered a cleaner ways of moving goods and persons when compared to other modes of transport. Safety is a paramount driver that can never be neglected. And the infrastructure is an essential component to ensure efficiency and connectivity in all our transport modes. In addition, over the years, the EU acquis has increased and has strengthened the role of the relevant EU agencies like EMSA, like ERA, as a technical body, service provider, facilitator, and knowledge hub. This event has a strong symbolic dimension and emphasizes the value of connecting, essential both for people and for goods. The pandemic has shown the importance of the continuous movement of vital supply throughout the logistic chain. Whether it is a ship, train, plane, or truck, connectivity has been constantly ensured thanks to the resilience of the transport sector and the service-oriented approach of our workers. Sustainability, safety, and digitalization are also common denominations for all transport modes, with the final objective of greener, safer, smarter multimodal transport. We all work within the horizontal priorities of the European Commission, and we all contribute to the objectives that are shared and implemented through the different modes of transport. It was only yesterday that we hosted in these premises the launch of the European Maritime Transport Environmental Report, the first of that kind, which was jointly prepared by EMSA and the European Environmental Agency. Shipping needs to take its share in the commitment and efforts to meet the ambitious objectives of the European Green Deal. And this is clearly a drive for the years to come in the next decade, when the maritime sector faces a crucial crossroads. The transposition to the more economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable sector. And this applies mutatis mutandis to rail sector as well. If we want to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050, we need to move to the concrete actions now. Clarity and certainty in the legal framework to be applied is also essential in support of the investments that will be needed. Here, as the EU agency, we are at the side of the European Commission, European Parliament, EU member states, and the industry to accompany and facilitate this revolution. Similar, I would say, to the one that occurred when, for example, shipping moved from sails to steam engines. It is a challenge, but it is also the opportunity for all parties involved and for the EU transport sector as a whole, which would result in a clear competitive advantage at the global market. We need, therefore, to join our efforts, develop partnership, ensure that all parties involved are committed and on board, and move to the concrete actions. This is the only possible recipe of success for our planet and for our future generation. And this movement, symbolic movement of the train, is a step towards this goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Maya. Wonderful start. And it's now my great honor and my great opportunity to thank Minister Pedro Nuno Santos, Minister of Portugal for Infrastructure and Housing. And thank you, sir, to you and all your team for everything you've done. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to receive you here in Portugal, one of the most ancient countries in Europe, and this capital, one of the most beautiful capitals in Europe. I hope you enjoy your stay in Portugal. Matthew, Baldwin, thank you very much. And thank you very much especially for the joy present in your compliments and your openness of the conference. We need that. Thank you, Maja, for receiving us here. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm going to speak in my mother language, so allow me for that. I will try to speak slowly to facilitate the translation. Senhora Comissária dos Transportes, Adina Vallien, quero começar por dar-lhe as boas-vindas a Lisboa. Infelizmente não foi possível recebê-la durante a presidência portuguesa, como estava planeado, mas temos muito gosto em contar aqui com a sua presença hoje. Dou também as boas-vindas a todos os que estão presentes aqui na sala ou à distância, representantes das instituições europeias e nacionais, representantes das associações do setor ferroviário, trabalhadores ferroviários, entusiastas ou apenas passageiros, frequentes ou ocasionais. Fazer de 2021 o Ano Europeu do Transporte Ferroviário deu-nos o excelente pretexto para podermos passar um ano inteiro a falar de comboios na Europa. É uma conversa que tem envolvido políticos, técnicos, sociedade civil e todos os cidadãos. Uma conversa onde há diferentes pontos de vista, mas só assim se pode tornar o debate interessante e útil. Todos partilhamos a consciência de que a transição modal para a ferrovia é um dos instrumentos mais eficazes que temos para reduzir as emissões de gases de efeito estufa e atingir a neutralidade carbónica em 2050, ou desejavelmente antes. O transporte ferroviário combina uma eficiência energética imbatível com o facto de estar eletrificado em maior escala do que qualquer outro modo de transporte. Ao contrário do automóvel, do navio e, sobretudo, do avião, já não existe nenhuma barreira tecnológica à eletrificação total do transporte ferroviário. Toda a tecnologia de que precisamos para isso está disponível há muitas décadas. O transporte ferroviário tem outro papel muito importante, a contribuir para que a transição climática seja socialmente justa e equilibrada. É importante dizer algo que não é dito às vezes suficientes. Sem justiça social, não haverá transição climática. Não será possível, nem é justo, obrigar as pessoas, que já passam dificuldades diariamente, a suportar maiores custos, em dinheiro ou em tempo, quando ambos esses recursos já são escassos nas suas vidas. A liberdade de escolha é, por vezes, um luxo. Não podemos ter ilusões quanto a isso. Em matéria de mobilidade, temos a obrigação de oferecer aos cidadãos soluções que lhes permitam, ao mesmo tempo, melhorar a sua qualidade de vida e ser mais sustentáveis para o ambiente. Isso implica uma alteração do paradigma das nossas cidades, que terão de se libertar da dependência do automóvel que construíram ao longo da segunda metade do século XX. O comboio estará no centro do sistema de mobilidade que nos libertará do automóvel. O tipo de transporte ferroviário que nos permitirá alcançar isso é muito mais do que ter um comboio a passar numa estação a uma determinada hora. As pessoas hoje precisam de um transporte que as leve onde querem e precisam de ir quando querem ou precisam de ir de forma confortável, rápida, barata e com a flexibilidade para poderem mudar de planos ou acudir a um imprevisto. Para nós, em Portugal, o Ano Europeu do Transporte Ferroviário, em 2021, foi mesmo uma feliz coincidência. A ferrovia foi, desde o início, uma prioridade indiscutível da ação deste governo. Compreende-se facilmente porque dedicamos tanto tempo a falar de ferrovia durante a presidência portuguesa, no primeiro semestre deste ano. É verdade que Portugal está longe de poder afirmar que tem uma das melhores redes ferroviárias da Europa. Tal como disse, Portugal e Lisboa são do melhor país e cidade da Europa. A rede ferroviária não. Já tenho falado várias vezes do esforço de recuperação da rede e dos serviços ferroviários que fizemos e continuamos a fazer em Portugal. Após décadas de desinvestimento, esta recuperação permitiu-nos voltar a prestar aos passageiros um serviço em que podem confiar. Permite-me também dizer-vos aqui hoje que temos em curso obras de modernização em todos os principais corredores da nossa rede ferroviária. Temos também já bastante avançadas as obras de construção do maior troço de nova linha férrea em muitas décadas, a nova linha Évora-Elvas, que é uma peça-chave na criação de uma ligação rápida entre Lisboa e Madrid. Na próxima década, Portugal tem 3 grandes prioridades para o desenvolvimento da sua rede ferroviária. Concluir a eletrificação e modernização de toda a rede. Resolver as limitações à capacidade nas áreas metropolitanas. E criar um eixo de alta velocidade entre Porto e Lisboa, estendendo-o depois para norte até à Galiza. A construção das novas linhas entre Porto e Lisboa e entre Porto e Vigo está a ser pensada de forma perfeitamente integrada na rede existente. Desta forma, criaremos um eixo ferroviário de elevado desempenho e de grande capacidade, quer no transporte de passageiros, quer no de mercadorias. As 2 áreas metropolitanas ficarão ligadas em pouco mais de 1 hora. Isto representa uma revolução nos padrões de mobilidade e no tipo de relações económicas, profissionais, pessoais, familiares que se podem estabelecer. É uma mudança muito importante na estrutura do território português. e na forma como as duas áreas metropolitanas se vão interrelacionar. Mas os benefícios também se estendem ao resto do país, através da redução dos tempos de viagem que será possível fazer em muitas ligações a outras regiões, como a Beira Alta ou ao próprio Alentejo. Conseguiremos encolher o país de uma forma que só tem precedente quando em 1864 a primeira linha férrea Lisboa-Porto reduziu para 14 horas uma viagem que antes demorava 34 horas em carruagens puxadas por cavalos. Em Portugal, como na Europa, não queremos que a atenção que está a ser dada à ferrovia se esgote com o fim do Ano Europeu do Transporte Ferroviário. É por isso que Portugal está, pela primeira vez na sua história, a elaborar um plano ferroviário nacional, que irá estabelecer a rede e os serviços ferroviários de que o país precisa para lá de 2030. Vai-nos permitir perceber o quão longe podemos ir na transferência modal para a ferrovia e o que é preciso fazer para lá chegar. Dotar o país de um instrumento de planeamento de longo prazo para a ferrovia é um contributo indispensável para tentar garantir que o impulso que estamos agora a dar não se esgota em futuros ciclos políticos e que a conversa que agora iniciamos, neste Ano Europeu de Transporte Ferroviário, continua por muitos anos e décadas. O caminho de ferro é um bem público, é nessa perspectiva que trabalhamos em Portugal e com os nossos parceiros europeus. Muito obrigado e boa conferência. Enjoy your stay in Lisbon. Thank you very much.
Matthew, dear Ministry, dear Secretary of State, European coordinators, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, I had hoped to be here in Lisbon to kick off the European Year of Rail in March. As that wasn't possible, today is all the more special for me. I'd like to welcome all the rail enthusiasts who are following today's conference online. Thank you for joining us. Back in March, I announced the Connecting Europe Express, our flagship project for the year. Since then, and in less than 6 months, the concept has evolved into a fully fledged train, or rather 3 trains, marked with the EU colors and ready to begin their journey across our wonderful continent. And what better place to begin this journey than Lisbon? And I'm happy to share this moment with our Portuguese friends who were so supportive of the European Year of Rail throughout their presidency. Today is all about passengers, and in particular the high-speed rail and the city-to-city connections that they want. This conference will be a good opportunity to look at these topics, both from infrastructure and service perspective. With 201,000 kilometers of railway lines, we have the second longest railway network in the world and one of the most dense. So much of the hard work has already been done. This infrastructure has ensured connectivity and cohesion between member states, and it has given real impetus to our single market as well. Our high-speed network is growing, and with it potential to attract more passengers and to provide green alternatives to short-haul flights and car travel. But of course, we can all do better. In our sustainable and smart mobility strategy, we include the milestone of doubling high-speed rail traffic across Europe by 2030, and also the one tripling it by 2050. And we want to see scheduled collective travel under 500 kilometers in Europe carbon neutral within the EU by 2030. For this to happen, we need to complete the Trans-European Transport Network, the TEN-T, without delay. In the autumn, the Commission will propose updates to the TEN-T regulation to ensure the network can support our sustainability and digital ambition, and to ensure the core part of the network is completed by 2030. The successes of Öresund Bridge between Denmark and Sweden, and the high-speed rail network between Paris, London, Amsterdam, and Cologne demonstrate the added value of completing other cross-border projects as fast as possible. I'm thinking at Rail Baltica, Lyon-Turin, Y-Basque, Fehmarn, Brenner, Dresden-Prague, Vienna, Bratislava, Budapest, and many other linking out in southeastern Europe. But building or upgrading rail infrastructure takes time. So it's important that we manage better what we already have and improve rail capacity. This is where digitalization comes. Just developing the European Rail Traffic Management System, the ERTMS, will make a huge difference to capacity as well to safety, reliability, and punctuality. I look forward to our European ERTMS coordinator's thoughts on how we can accelerate deployment at European level. I'm also following rail research and innovation, including future technologies such as Hyperloop. The Commission, together with the European Union Agency for Railways and the Shift to Rail joint undertaking, is looking at how to support its further development. Transporting people and goods at up to 1,000 kilometers per hour via magnetically levitated pods in vacuum tubes was science fiction just a few years ago, and now it's getting closer to reality. So Hyperloop will certainly capture the imagination of our passengers. But what they want in the meantime is better services. They want to be able to book a ticket that covers a train as well as a ferry or a bus ride. They want rail to be accessible. They want tickets that are affordable. And they want to know that trains will arrive in time. This is why we are working on an action plan to boost long distance and cross-border rail passengers services. Passengers also want to be sure of their rights. The Rail Passenger Rights Regulation adopted in the spring strengthened these rights when dealing with disruptions. We need to look at rail through the eyes of all users, wherever they live, however they use trains. So I'm pleased to see a diverse representative panel here today to talk about high-speed rail services. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we send the Connecting Europe Express on its way, we are also launching a living laboratory. The train will highlight the achievements of rail in our continent, but also will show the limitations of our single European railway area. Let us see this as an opportunity to come together, to create the much-needed momentum, political and social momentum, to put the rail at the heart of our sustainable, smart, and resilient mobility of the future. Thank you very much.
some time for vigorous discussion, and we invite you to join with us as long as time allows. I'd like to begin, therefore, by inviting Professor Carlo Secchi and Mr. Federico Francisco to join us, please, on stage. I think you're welcome to join on the audience. Thank you. Thank you again very much. Please, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. And in this opening segment, we can begin indeed by setting the scene. Where does the European Union stand when it comes to high-speed rail? How does our network compare with the rest of the world? And to begin answering these questions, it's great for us to have today with us Professor Carlo Secchi, the European coordinator of the Atlantic Core Network, who's going to kick off by providing us with an overview of the current planned high-speed network in the EU and what we can learn from other regions. Professor Secchi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Dear European Commissioner Dina Valean, dear Minister Pedro Nuno, dear Secretary of State Jorge Delgado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here today as the European coordinator of the Atlantic Corridor, as it was just said, of the TNT network, corridor which starts exactly here in Lisbon and then goes up towards the heart of Europe, the geographical center of Europe. The conference is focusing on high-speed rail as a means to connect quickly and in a sustainable way the different EU cities. Therefore, in setting the scene, I will focus on the putting in place of the necessary infrastructure, while Federico Francisco from the Cabinet of Minister Nuno will go, I imagine, into the maximization of the use of the infrastructure itself. I will start by showing you the map of the existing and planned high-speed rail network in the EU. Should be on the screen. You see it over there. And the core network of this entire network will be almost 22,000 kilometers long, of which 42% is already completed. What I'm showing you is what we foreseen to be what is foreseen by the TEN-T regulation starting from end 2013. Some plans have changed in the meantime, and those changes will be reflected in the ongoing revision of the regulation, but the big picture, of course, will remain valid. What it is interesting to look at in this moment is to other regions of the world, to find some useful hints and suggestions. So let me start with China. Here you have the high speed that should be on the screen in a second. Here it is. Here you have the high speed network projected. And I will emphasize especially 4 points. First, the Chinese started developing their network only in the year 2000, with the first service opening between Beijing and Tianjin in 2008. So it took them only 20 years to develop the whole network. That evidences that good planning, financial commitment, and streamlined procedures are key elements of success. Of course, we do not have the luxury of being one entity with common financing and common procedures, but we at the EU are working within our constraints to nevertheless achieve a comprehensive, efficient, and interoperable EU high-speed network. And we have put in place tools such as the TEN-T policy and the CEF financial instruments to make it possible. We also recently got the streamlining directive adopted for larger cross-border projects in order to speed up their implementation. Number two, the realization of this high-speed rail network has transformed the Chinese society and economy, and that is exactly what our EU high-speed network has the potential to do, as underlined also by Commissioner Valiant. What happened in China is that first moving passengers to high-speed lines freed up conventional lines to carry more freight. Second, it stimulated the economy as construction created jobs and drove up demand for additional construction, steel and cement industry. And it gave birth to a flourishing high-speed rail equipment industry. Third, it facilitated cross-city economic integration and promoted the growth of second-tier cities. And fourth, it supported environmental sustainability. Studies indicate that the cost benefit of a Chinese high-speed rail network is positive in the magnitude of hundreds of billions of euros, despite the related costs. I find this extremely important to realize, especially in the current post-COVID recovery period. Point three, the Chinese network was financed through the national government, of course, but also up to 40% by bonds, by the market. These bonds are quite successful because they are considered to be relatively safe investment, as they are backed by tangible assets and implicitly by the government. This is something which I'm advocating for the EU, and I'm particularly happy that the Commission proposed early in July a proposal for a regulation on European green bonds, also for the purposes I'm talking about. Point four, the development of the high-speed rail network has forced domestic airlines in China to slash airfare and cancel regional flights. This impact has been most acute for intercity trips under 500 kilometers, and this is, of course, a sustainable modal shift. Let me now briefly turn to Japan in order to highlight two key points. Japan is the forerunner of high-speed rail in the world and started operating its network already in 1964 for the first Tokyo Olympics. I like to focus here on the impacts. Firstly, the economics impact of the Japanese high-speed rail network has had a significant beneficial effect on Japan's business, economy, society, and environment, beyond the mere construction and operational contributions. The results in time saving alone have an impact of several billions per year. The network also reduces the congestion burden, increasing through output and minimal land footprint. Connectivity rejuvenated rural towns that would otherwise be too distant from major cities. Secondly, the environmental benefits with the modal shift from road and air. The high-speed rail network replaced air travel for journeys of less than 750 kilometers, while air and rail remain competitive with one another in the 800 and 900 kilometer range, and air has a higher market share, of course, for journeys of more than 1,000 kilometers. There will be many other things to say about these two examples and other regions of the world to learn from, but I have to stop because of time constraints. I hope that I was able to convince you of how far we can go with high-speed rail and how beneficial it can be, and of the importance of working together as one. I would like to say also a few words about how we can realize the missing parts of our high-speed rail network in the EU. Of course, the best option is to construct new high-speed lines that are from the start designed with the right parameters. At the same time, we have to take into account the budget limitations and the fact that a positive cost-benefit cannot be achieved right away everywhere. That is why it is important to also consider the option of upgrading existing lines to achieve a higher speed. Here, the European Commission is considering, in the context of the revision of the TEN-T regulation, to set a minimum average speed of 160 kilometers an hour as a requirement for such upgrades. It is indeed fundamental that we complete our high-speed network by the deadline of 2030 for the core network and 2050 or earlier, if possible, for the comprehensive network, instead of staying with uncompleted sections that would break the dynamics at cross borders and macro levels. Now it is the right momentum for rail, and now it is time to achieve this. Dear Commissioner, dear Minister, dear Secretary of State, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your attention, and I now pass on the word to Mr. Federico Francisco, and I'm sure he will be able to demonstrate that we can achieve our goals not only by having the hard infrastructure in place, which is fundamental, of course, but also through other equally important means. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Secchi. That was a wonderful presentation, and I think against the backdrop of what is happening in China and Japan, your clarion call for the member states to complete the TEN-T network will have been heard by all of us, and we echo that from the European Union side. So you've looked at the infrastructure, but we know that investments in high-speed rail place a great financial burden on the member states, on the union itself, and of course, ultimately on the taxpayer. And of course, the high-speed network cannot, by definition, extend to every corner of the EU. So the question we now like to address is how we can maximize its utilization, how we can ensure that its benefits feed through into other parts of the union that are not directly crossed by these high-speed lines, or not yet. In other words, how do we ensure that high speed really delivers to society as a whole? And to answer those questions, it's a great pleasure to welcome Frederico Francesco, the coordinator for the National Rail Plan here in Portugal, and advisor to the Minister for Infrastructure and Housing. Mr. Francesco, please.
Thank you very much, Matthew, Madam Commissioner, Minister, Secretary of State, dear guests. I think this should work. Let me just try it out. Yes, okay, it is working. So good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about high-speed rail. And I thank Professor Secchi for his presentation, because now I will be able to take it in a somewhat different direction. Okay, I was going on the wrong way with the remote, I'm sorry. So I can now take a somewhat different perspective on the same issues that Professor Secchi addressed. So this will be a familiar map for all of you. It's a similar one it's similar to the one that Professor Secchi showed. This is one I took from Wikipedia that also shows other lines, but it clearly shows the colored high-speed rail lines concentrated on the so-called blue banana in Europe, which is the region that extends from northern England to northern Italy. And then we know that we have a very large high-speed rail network in Spain, but it is mainly concentrated in these countries, and it has been developed from the center to the peripheries of these countries. So the different high-speed rail lines in the different countries are not yet as connected as we need them to be in order to form a true European high-speed rail network. This will also be a familiar chart for all of you. It shows the growth of the length of high-speed lines in the European Union. So I'm not putting here the comparison with China so we will not be embarrassed by it, but we can see that we have been growing at a very steady pace since 1981, when the first high-speed rail line opened in Europe. So what I would like to talk about is, what is the definition of high speed? There is a definition on the regulations that is mainly about the speed that the infrastructure allows. So a new line that allows speeds over 250 kilometers per hour, or an upgraded line above 200 kilometers per hour, is defined as high-speed line according to European regulations. But whereas it is easy to have a definition in terms of infrastructure, it's not so easy to define what is a high-speed rail service. So I would like to put forward a possible definition for a high-speed rail service so that we can then discuss around it. So a high-speed rail service would be a long-distance, high-quality, fast passenger rail service that can compete with short-haul air travel. So this will be a definition that is open to discussion, but it's where I'd like to start. When talking about high-speed rail, we often focus too much on speed. But I would begin by arguing that time is much more important than speed. And to show that, I would like to show this chart. There are many different versions of it on many articles. This one is taken from a UIC document. And it shows, for each dot on the chart represents a origin-destination pair. And it shows on the horizontal axis the travel time by train, and on the vertical axis the modal share of train. And what this chart very clearly shows is the magic number of the 3 hours travel time. So whenever travel time by rail is under 2.5 hours, in almost all cases, rail dominates the market. Whenever travel time by rail is over 5 hours, 5.5 hours, air travel will dominate the market. So the place where the competition between rail and air actually takes place is in between the 2.5 and 5.5 hours. So this highlights how important it is to talk more about time than about speed. So talking about rail, of course, rail transport is more adequate for high capacity and high volumes of transport. The LGV Sud-Est was the first high-speed line to open in Europe. The first portion of it opened in 1981, and it is currently the busiest high-speed line in Europe. It carries over 45 million passengers a year and is currently being upgraded to allow for a modest increase in that capacity. We are talking about a capacity of 16,000 seats per hour each way, which is comparable to very busy suburban rail lines in any European metropolis. But talking about a high-capacity infrastructure, and we have a high-capacity infrastructure available to us, this high-capacity infrastructure also supports other services. And different countries have, along the years, tried different models of exclusive high-speed rail usage, allowing conventional trains to use also high-speed rails, having high-speed trains traveling also on classic lines. And in most European countries, we have been converging to the Model 4 over there, where high-speed trains can use classic lines and classic trains also can use high-speed lines in a perfectly integrated network between so-called high-speed rails and conventional network. And this is also the model that we are working on here in Portugal. One way to maximize the utilization of high-speed lines is to use them also for regional services, like I was just saying, in those different models of utilization. One such example is how Spain created these high-speed regional services that they call AVAN. It's the Renfe AVAN, that are regional rail services that run exclusively or almost exclusively on high-speed lines in shorter distances than those that are typical of high-speed services. This is distances under 200 kilometers, with stops every around 50 kilometers. So high-speed rail can be at the same time can be on the one hand a high-capacity network and a high-capacity service, and also a regional service where that capacity is available. But can it do both at the same time? Can we have a high capacity and local high-speed train? The answer is yes. And the example to show this is how the Tokaido Shinkansen, which was the first high-speed line in Japan, can achieve this. The Tokaido Shinkansen opened in 1964. It is 515 kilometers in length, and it has 17 stations in those 515 kilometers. This is a high-speed station every 32 kilometers on average. So this is very truly a local service that has some trains that stop on all the stations and has some trains that stop in few stations, that, as is shown in the diagram in the lower part of that slide. When we look at the ridership in this high-speed line, we get to truly impressive numbers. So we are talking about 174 million passengers in 2019. This is more than all rail passengers transported in Portugal every year. And also, we are talking about 56 billion passenger kilometers, or put it another way, almost half all the passenger kilometers transported in all European high-speed lines over 1 year. So these are truly impressive numbers for a single line that show us how the potential to increase capacity that we still have on our high-speed lines. So I have this clock here on my left that shows me that I have 2 minutes, so I'll try to go a little bit faster with a small provocation. Can we transport freight on high speed? So we have this spectrum for the freight transport, where on one end of the spectrum we have freight with a low value of time, that is typically the freight that we have in containers and in ships. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have air freight, that is a freight with high time value. So the rail freight typically addresses the low time value end of the spectrum. Can high-speed rail offer something for the other end of the spectrum? The answer is yes, and it has been tried at least twice in Europe. The first attempt was in France with the postal TGV that ended its operation in 2015, operated for over 20 years. But now, recently, in Italy, we have the Mercitalia Fast, which is a new service using converted high-speed trains to transport parcels and high-value post and high-value freight along the high-speed lines. Of course, we know that high-speed rail has much lower greenhouse gas emissions than other modes, specifically planes and cars, but to show the difference to planes is really an order of magnitude. The rule of thumb is high-speed rail has 10 times lower emissions than a plane. So this is really a very big difference. And even if we talk about a diesel high-speed train, and this may raise a few eyebrows, but we have numerous examples of diesel high-speed trains in Europe and also more recently in the United States. It is still about 60% better than a plane in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. I would just like to highlight an example of how environmental protection can be taken a step forward to environmental restoration at the pretext of the building of a new high-speed line. This is the green corridor that is being built along the high-speed 2 line in the United Kingdom. They are going to plant over 7 million trees along the new line that is being built between London and Birmingham. And this will surely have a very large effect in offsetting the embodied carbon emissions from the construction of the line. So, about the future. Is the future a higher speed? We don't actually know. There is, at the moment, not an obvious demand for a higher speed in high-speed rail, but if there is, the existing technology, as shown by the current holder of the speed record on rail, still has a very large margin to improve, even before we have to use new technologies like maglev or like Hyperloop, which, being new technologies, maglev is an existing technology, Hyperloop is still, I would say, a few decades away. They are much more expensive than conventional rail and may turn into something like the Concorde, which offered much higher speed than conventional air travel, but it ended up being a commercial failure. So, but this is just some food for thought and for the conference along the rest of the day. I would like to leave you with this beautiful picture of the TGV on the LGV Sud-Est, and thank you very much for the opportunity, and wish everyone a good conference. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for those excellent opening remarks. We're running a little bit short of time, so I'd like to address both of you with a similar question about how we overcome obstacles. Professor Secchi, I mean, you've explained very well how well China has done in terms of its fast development. Do you really think we can replicate those success factors in a democratic context, given that we operate a bit different here in the European Union? So what are the key obstacles that we can overcome? I'd like you to think about this question, Mr. Francesco. In the EU context, what's the biggest challenge that you think we have to overcome in order to deliver on those high capacity, high quality, as well as high speed services in the coming years? So first, Professor Sek.
Well, thank you very much for your question, very important. I think that at the European level, we can act on a variety of lines of conduct and proposals to put forward. But the most important of which, in my opinion, have to do with the regulatory. I mentioned the streamlining directive, which is the first step of such a process. We must insist and continue in that direction, because what hampers a more speedy implementation of the TEN-T system and other related plans is indeed, in many cases, what national and sometimes local regulations of all kinds, of course. I don't go into details. Put an off the Fairman Belt story. It's a negative success story.
Yes.
In this respect. Parallel to this, we must think increasingly in a creative way about financing. Of course, public financial support from the union's budget and from other sources, public sources, is fundamental, because we have to do with public goods. It was said by Minister Nuno Santos. We have to do with the creation of external positive economies nobody pays for, etc., etc. But we must increase our efforts to take on board the private. That is the crucial challenge we have in front of us. Some progress has been made, of course. Our instruments at the community level have been partly adapted to this. I'm thinking about the blending approach and similar things, the guarantee component of many financial instruments, and so on. But we must continue to work in this direction, have a very tight dialogue with potential private investors. We know there is a huge amount of liquidity around, which is willing to work with us. We must create the conditions and facilitate what is necessary.
As you say, it's not a simple answer, a complex question we're going to have to resolve. Mr. Francisco, what's your view on this?
So, very quickly, I would say that the main challenges that we face in offering these high quality and high capacity services are not the same across all geographies of Europe. So, for example, in Portugal or in other more peripheral areas, we are still lacking infrastructure. And we still need to make those huge investments in infrastructure, and we still face the challenges of financing them, as Professor Secchi was just mentioning. In other regions of Europe where there are already well-developed high-speed services and high-speed lines, we actually have few problems with congested high-speed lines. We have LGV Sud-Est, and I believe not many others, but perhaps we are lacking in a more tight integration between high-speed services, regional services, local services, not only in metropolitan areas, but also in lower density geographies and areas with lower population density.
Thank you very much indeed for that clear answer. Intriguing to hear from both of you. I hear about finance, and I also hear the issue, the classic line, one size does not fit all. Think about the periphery against the core. I'd like to thank you both for setting us so well on track in our opening discussion. I'd like to thank you both very much for your clear opening discussions with us today. And perhaps I could kindly invite you to leave the stage now. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a warm round of applause. So as we now change gear, if you can change gear on the train, I think we have the additional chair. Thank you very much indeed. I think I'd like to invite to join me on stage, please, Jorge Ballesteros, Elena Valenzuela, Federico Moda, and Maria Luisa Dominguez. So please join me up here on the stage. Thank you very much indeed. And I'd like you to think, if you're watching online or if you're here in the audience, to join the discussion on Twitter, #ConnectingEurope. That's our main hashtag for the Connecting Europe Express. And it's been lively on Twitter. Let's make it lively again. Please all take a seat. So lovely to have you with me. High-speed rail, like all expensive bits of infrastructure, has to make its case. It has to show how it can change mobility patterns for citizens, offering radical reductions in travel times between cities, just heard Francesco, creating credible alternatives to short-haul flights and car travel. It's not going to happen just because the European Commission says so. It has to show how it can transform the economic competitiveness of the regions that it serves. And last but not least, it needs to show how high-speed rail is absolutely compatible with the goal of greater competition in the rail market. And we need to see how competition can help make high-speed rail cheaper and thus even more accessible. So in our next session, we're delighted to have with us today two ladies to my left, gentlemen to my right, four speakers to give us short presentations of high-speed rail success story. And so perhaps we could begin with Mr. Jorge Ballesteros, head of the rail department in the Spanish Ministry of Transport, MITMA, who's going to give us the first presentation on the Madrid-Seville high-speed connection to show the multiplier effect of high-speed services. Over to you. As you wish, you can speak from the podium if you wish. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you to the Commission. Thank you to the Portuguese government. And I take the opportunity to present you, to show you how the construction of the high-speed line between Madrid and Sevilla changes the path, changes the history of the Spanish railway market. No? And how the construction of this line meant the beginning of the presently longest high-speed rail network in Europe. We are going to review the origin of this flagship project, the design of the project, the initial design, the final design of the project, and the services that actually run in the Spanish rail network. Okay, the origin of the project, we have to, the framework of the origin of the project is the situation of the high-speed line in the world at that time. We are talking about the year 1986 and 1987. At this moment, there were only three high-speed lines in the world. One, the previously mentioned, the Tokyo-Osaka. The other is the Rome-Florencia in Italy, as an upgrading of the existing line. And the other one is the already also mentioned, the Paris-Lyon commissioning in the year 1981. And at the moment of the start of the project Madrid-Sevilla, the total length of the high-speed network in the world is more or less 2,400 kilometers, and in which only a quarter part of this long was in Europe. At the end of the construction of the Madrid-Sevilla, the total length in the world is more or less a half in Japan and a half in Europe. The situation of the planning, the rail planning in Spain at this time, there was a rail transport plan approved for the Council of Ministers in the year 1987, but this plan, the aim of this plan was the modernization of the core network in the country. In this plan, the high-speed or new high-speed line were not mentioned. They mentioned the upgrade of the main lines and corridor from the south of the north of the country, and the upgrade to the 2,000 kilometers per hour in the triangle Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia. Those are the three main cities in the country. In this condition, the target time for the Madrid-Sevilla relations was more or less the 250 minutes. At this time of the implementation of the project, we're talking, about the 1986. There are two different elements very important. One is the moment in which Spain joined the European community. This incorporation was in the year 1986, and the possibility to access to the European funds, especially the regional ones, was a very important issue for this project and for other projects in Spain as the highways, the highways in the roads. And the other one is, at this time, there are many initiatives in Europe from the early 80s to promote the high speed in Europe. There was another initiative from the Commission, many working groups that was madurated the idea of a high-speed network in Europe during this decade of the 80s. The initial design of the project was coincident with the planning at these years, and they has three elements. The extreme of this line, using the 16 line in the Madrid area and the Córdoba-Sevilla axis, and they propose a new line in the middle of the stretch, a new line between Madrid and Córdoba, but only for 2,000 kilometers per hour. There are a key decision in the year 1988, decision taken by the Council of the Ministers, in which they decide to introduce the standard gauge in the network of the new high-speed lines in Spain, and to promote the priority the construction of this line, the Madrid-Sevilla and the Madrid-Barcelona ones. This decision means to change the design of the line Madrid-Sevilla, and finally the design of this line is the one line in which the total length was reduced in 100 kilometers, and the time of the journey goes from 6 hours at this time and 2 hours and 20 minutes at this moment. So the average velocity speed in the relation goes from more or less 100 kilometers per hour and more than 200 kilometers per hour. This is the evolution of the total market in Spain from this year. On the left of the horizontal axis, there is the year 1922 in which the Madrid-Sevilla was committed, and this at the end is the present situation in the year 219. It could be in the color purple is the evolution of the high-speed train, and in the blue is the evolution of the classic or conventional long-distance trains. It's very clear that the total the volume of passengers in the relation on the region, not only the region, in all the in all the lines in Spain has increased dramatically. It's very important in this sense. Sorry, in this sense, what is the share of the high-speed lines in Spain? And in this chart is possible to see what is the situation in the Madrid-Sevilla share. At the beginning, during the construction of the situation previously to the commitment of the line, the situation was 38 for the rail and 72 for the plane. The present situation is 86% for the train and only 14 for the plane. The situation is more or less in the rest of the high-speed line in Spain. All of them are around between the 80 and the 90% of the share, except in the Madrid-Barcelona, in which the share is around the 60-65%. Madrid-Barcelona is a very special line with a very competitive plane services, but even show the share is positive for the railways. And to finalize, we can show what is the difference high-speed services in the network in Spain. There are, of course, the pure high-speed trains, the long-distance high-speed trains. The other is for the special network in Spain with the standard gauge and the Iberian gauge. There are long-distance variable gauge in which there are important share of the passengers. Is the other services is, as Federico mentioned previously, the regional high-speed train for regional services.
Okay.
In this sense,
if you could wrap up just please.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
We finalize with this the chart of the total long-distance trains in Spain from the history, from the 40s in the past century. It's very clear that the present situation as the railways transport more passengers than ever, and for us, in our opinion, the future is it has a very prospect. Thank you for.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Barristeros. And sorry to remind you on time, but we are running short of time, which is the great battle for rail. Our second speaker, thank you, please take a seat. Our second speaker, Ms. Ellen Valenzuela, who is the General Director of WIGO España, new entrant in the Spanish market, and of course, formerly the COO of Thales, is going to present the example of the Paris-Brussels connection, which in the pre-COVID times, one of us or other used to take from time to go to meetings. And please, Ms. Valenzuela, the floor.
Thank you very much. Okay, so a few photos, different photos than we saw before, and maybe more recent about the TGV. You saw before the orange TGV, the historical one. We'll speak about the modern one today. So maybe as you know already, and many data have been commented already this morning, studies show that traveling by train generates a carbon footprint 80 times lower than traveling by plane and 50 times lower than a car journey. In the EU, rail is responsible for less than 0.5% of transport-related greenhouse gas emissions. This makes it one of the most sustainable forms for passenger and freight transport. Today, we are here to spotlight and encourage the use of rail and contribute to the EU Green Deal goal of becoming climate neutral by 2050. That's also why we believe in railway success stories, whether they are about cooperation or competition. So, please let me tell you about current developments and what is driving our motivation today in SNCF. The authorities aim at reducing short-distance flights and substituting them by high-speed trains. That's especially the case in the Netherlands, where the authorities work on the connections from Schiphol. London, Paris, and Frankfurt are the three main destinations which represent the largest potential for modal shift. They represent almost 9 million passengers a year and 500 million kilos of carbon emissions. Today, I will comment very briefly, I reassure you, on the alternatives that SNCF proposes in Northern Europe with Thalys and in Southern Europe with the brand new and successful low-cost operator Ouigo España. So, the train is the best way to travel and protect the planet. The public opinion in Europe is favorable to this shift. You see that 62% of European people support a ban of short-distance flights. A few countries already decided, like France, or are planning to ban domestic flights where trains are available in order to cut emissions. But this is not enough. Studies tell us that environment concern can help modal change, but despite this environment concern, only about 7% of passengers and only 11% of goods travel by rail. So, how will the shift from plane to rail happen? Accelerating air rail substitution requires policy, which addresses both the supply and demand sides of both airplanes and trains. On the demand side, on the one hand, the public authorities can make the train more attractive, acting on flight taxes and on regulation. And on the other hand, stimulating competition on the tracks and through incentives to operators to increase their market share by signing substitution agreements with airlines. On the supply side, policies must aim at making the train a competitive alternative by connecting airports with high-speed lines, by improving connection between trains and planes, and by streamlining infrastructure charges between member states, and lowering drastically these infrastructure charges to reduce costs of high-speed train operations. So Thalys, what about Thalys in Northern Europe? The Thalys network benefits from rapid access to the main airports in Northern Europe with direct services to Schiphol, Paris-Charles de Gaulle, and Düsseldorf Airport. With a climate concern, the Dutch government is providing KLM with subsidies to convert its feeder flights to sustainable ground transportation. Therefore, Thalys has been part of the modal shift from air to rail since 2011, when Thalys and KLM signed their first agreement to transfer air passengers by train to and from Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. Since 2016, this agreement was extended to other airlines. About 100,000 air and rail passengers per year traveled with Thalys between 2017 and 2020. And in September 2019, Thalys and KLM agreed to fully substitute one flight by a train as from March 2020 and further substitute the 4 remaining feeder flights between Brussels and Schiphol by Thalys trains. This project was postponed due to the COVID crisis. But KLM and Thalys teams are now back to work for a smooth and deeper air-to-rail transition. That's a three-part smart agreement, but it's not enough. In order to compete with flights, the train must be attractive. Journey duration, frequencies, and streamlined timetable between planes and trains. Easy ticketing, a good customer experience, high service reliability, and the most important item is price. The objective of SNCF is to create additional demand for train, shifting from planes and cars. And we have long-term experience of low-cost operations. In 2016, Thalys launched a low-cost product between Paris and Brussels called Easy, 30% cheaper than the classic Thalys and a travel time on 2.5 hours. 8 years ago, SNCF launched Ouigo, and 80 million people have traveled on low-cost Ouigo. Ouigo began operating as well in Spain 4 months ago, and it is already a huge, popular, and commercial success. Because we know price is key in order to make the shift to train happen. So as a conclusion, the train is the best way to travel, protecting the planet. To make the shift happen, railway operators must propose a good product at a good price. And one of the key conditions for this is that public authorities set the right conditions, especially in terms of infrastructure charges and regulation. The challenge is the same for operators and for governments, to bring more people to train. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a wonderful explanation. Thank you very much also for respecting our increasingly tight time constraints. Extremely useful and interesting. Our third speaker today, Mr. Federico Meda, who is the Chief Industrial Development Officer and IT at Nuovo Trasporto Viaggiatori. The question is, can Milano-Roma become every bit as powerful and strong as Paris, Brussels, and can competition on the route help deliver? Federico, what say you?
Thank you for the question, Matthew. Good morning, everybody. Many thanks to the Commission for the opportunity to be here. I will make you an overview of the huge benefits that the competition in the Italian high-speed railway market brought to all the stakeholders of the system. I used to say that the competition, if well implemented, if well regulated, is a win-win game. It brings advantages to all the actors of the system. Let me spend a few words about the company. We are a private operator. We started the operation in 2012. Today, we operate more than 120 services, and we move 24 million passengers. We have a market share of 30-35% of the market in scope. 1,500 employees with an average age of 32 years. So we are a very young company from all the points of view. Let's come to the benefits of the competition. I will analyze these benefits on 3 different levels: the offer, the ticket prices, and the traveling demand. Let's start with the offer. Between 2012, the entrance of Italo in the market, and 2019, the numbers of trains running on the Italian network has increased of more than 60%. So if we take the Roma-Milano connection, that is the core route of the Italian network, today there is a train every 10 minutes in the peak hours. If we take a sub-leg like the Rome to Florence, there is a train every 6 minutes. So we are speaking of frequencies close to the frequencies of a tube line. More trains, higher volumes means also more revenues throughout the track access charges for the infrastructure manager. So a higher capability to cover beyond the operative cost, also part of the capital cost of the remuneration of the capital to build the high-speed network. Another important point is the accessibility. Today, 16 out 18 Italian regions, excluding the island, are connected by services that use the high-speed network. Only Italo connect more than 60 cities. It is interesting to say that a recent study made by the University of Naples has shown how the cities directly connected by the high-speed has had between 2008 and 2018 an increase of the GDP of more than 8–10%, compared with 1–1.5 of all the other cities of the country. Last point about the offer is the quality. With the competition, we had an important increase of the quality of the offer. Comfort on board, more services on board, ancillary services before and after the travel. So I would say more quality along all the travel experience of the passenger. And pay attention, I'm not speaking only about Italo, I'm also speaking about the incumbent Trenitalia that increased a lot the quality of its offer. Let's move now to the ticket prices. I will be very, very quick. We had in between 2012 and 2019 a 40% drop of the ticket prices, with an estimated cumulative saving of more than 1.5 billion euro for all the passengers of the system. It is important to say that this drop was driven only by competition, and the most important thing is that this was a sustainable drop, because both Italo and the incumbent are healthy and profitable companies. That means that the drop was sustained on one hand by the productivity of the operators, and on the other hand by the volumes of passengers guaranteed by the market. And I arrive to the last point, so the traveling demand. Between 2008 and 2019, the traveling demand has increased of more than 100%, so has doubled. Today, more than 65 million passengers use the high-speed network to move from a city to another of the Italian country. Where does this demand come from? There is a good 30–35% that is induced demand. So new generated demand stimulated by the lower prices, the higher quality of the services, the higher frequencies, higher accessibility. So we are speaking of passengers that would have not traveled before, because, for example, the airplane was too expensive, the car, the traveling time too long, and the train, I don't know, uncomfortable. Then there is another good 60–65% that is modal share, modal split. We have seen how between Rome and Milan, we have had from 2008, so the first year of the high speed in Italy, and 2011, an increase of the modal share of the train from the 35% to the 55%, so driven by the high speed. With the competition, this modal share has increased from 55% to 80%. So today, between Rome and Milan, where before 2008 the airplane was the best travel option, the airplane has a modal share that is lower than 15%. A last important point concerning the traveling demand is related to the fact that with the competition in these 10 years, the incumbent didn't lose demand. The number of passengers traveling with incumbent has increased, also if we have a market share of 30–35%. This is due to the fact that all the factors that I told you before, quality, lower ticket prices, higher frequencies, allowed to increase a lot the dimension, the volume of the market, and today there is enough space for Italo and the incumbent to be profitable in a bigger market. So to conclude, the competition, if well implemented, well regulated, with the transportation authority in charge to monitor the market, with fair and undiscriminatory access condition to the network, with sustainable track access charges. This is a very important point. The track access charges have to be calibrated on the basis of the ability to pay of the market, because we have seen in Italy that for a 5% reduction in the track access charges, the increase in the volumes have been higher than 5%. So at the end of the story, the revenues for the infrastructure manager will be higher. So if there are all these conditions, the competition brings advantages for all the actors. The operators that can be profitable in a bigger market, the infrastructure manager that can make the most from the huge investment made by the government to build the high-speed network, passengers with more quality and lower ticket prices, and last but not least for the country, because the train is the most sustainable show mode on one hand, and on the other hand, because the high speed and the competition can drive the economical growth of the market, of the country. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Very interesting success story about the role of competition, and interesting to hear without loss of incumbent market share. Extremely interesting. Our final speaker, and then I hope we're still going to have some time left for discussion, is we're delighted to have with us today Ms. Maria Luisa Dominguez, who is the president of the Spanish Infrastructure Manager, ADIF, and is here today to present ADIF's innovative approach to the competitive tendering, another way of looking at competition, of high-speed services, following the opening of domestic rail services under the famous EU4 railway package in December 2020. Ms. Dominguez, you're very welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this invitation. It is an honor for ADIF to be part of this event in our neighboring country, Portugal, at such an important time for railways and in such an important year as the Year of Rail. Thank you also to the European Commission for organizing this conference on high speed and for considering the Spanish high-speed system as a truly successful story. It is indeed a story of determination and compromise, and one of the turning points of the transformation of our country over the last 30 years. High speed has been a lever and a proof that what Spain can accomplish. I hope that the story I'm going to share with you is honoring the purpose of and meaning of this European Year of Rail and the great effort we are all doing to promote the rail as the most efficient and sustainable way to move in Europe. The role of European funds and loans has been key to this success, of course. Also, our compliance with European regulations has helped to create a reliable, trustworthy, fair, and socially responsible railway system that we have now taken to the next level, opening high-speed passenger services to competition as of 2020. Over the last 30 years, ADIF has built over 3,600 kilometers on high-speed lines. We are deploying a high-quality network to ensure social and territorial cohesion and the same opportunities for as many citizens as possible. It is no secret, however, our network is large, but the rate of utilization has been quite low compared to other countries, and the capacity in our lines has a very large potential that we had to explore. The need to increase the use of our lines and to capitalize the great investments we had made are two of the drivers of our liberalization plan that I would like to present to you today. Our goal was not profitability as such, but we infrastructure managers need to ensure that a proper level of income allows us to provide the best management and maintenance for our clients, ensuring full safety and reliability. This can only be accomplished by reaching the best mix of the following: track access charges that operators can take, a fair and stable financing system for infrastructure managers, and as previously mentioned, the best level of utilization of the existing network. But most of all, if we wanted competition, we had to attract competitors. And we set the goal of having 3 companies operating in the same corridor. Our market was considered almost a natural monopoly only 3 years ago. We need to provide certainty for the large investments that are needed, and eventually we had to guarantee a win-win system for every counterpart. With that being said, we studied every precedent. We had a lot to learn, but none of them seemed to square the circle. If we were to succeed, we needed to develop a brand new model, and that was what we did. Just to summarize, I would say that we transformed our tailor-made capacity into a prêt-à-porter. ADIF has currently increased the offer capacity by 65%, a 50% increase in Madrid-Barcelona, 65% in Madrid East, and 75% in Madrid South. Spain has developed over the last 3 years a highly performing liberalization system that is currently in place, and by which 3 operators are now licensed on ADIF's high-speed network. Renfe, Ouigo, that is present here today in this panel, and ILSA, a subsidiary of Trenitalia and Ernostrum. The system was first discussed with the stakeholders, the regulators, and companies interested in taking part in the process, and the conclusion was to establish a system that would provide certainty for their business investments as well as for users and ADIF. Companies' interest was focused on the main corridors, Madrid-Barcelona, Madrid-Valencia-Alicante, and Madrid-Sevilla-Málaga.
So we designed 3 different packages, prioritizing the amount of requested capacity. I would like to point out, however, that the liberalization affects the whole network, and any operator can request access on any open line. Each package would imply a request for capacity on each one of the corridors because ADIF considered that all lines required an increased utilization. And our goal was to ensure that a fair commercial offer was established for as many users as possible, not only for those living along the most profitable corridor. Therefore, we designed 3 packages that include different levels of capacity allocation on each line for a period of 10 years. As much as 6 operators were interested at first, which was an important endorsement of the work carried out by ADIF. This process also ensured an orderly transition to open competition by guaranteeing the allocation of capacity for a long period of time. Finally, the packages were awarded to the companies that required a larger volume of capacity. Throughout its 10-year duration framework agreement, railway undertakings have access to a certain capacity allocation for the use of tracks and stations every year, but they can require more if they're interested. For now, Ouigo has started operating between Madrid and Barcelona, and very successfully, I must say. ILSA will begin operating in 2022 with new trains. They are starting the homologation process as we speak. Transparency and fair play are the cornerstone of the new vision. This liberalization model was recognized by the Spanish regulator as transparent, objective, and non-discriminatory, stressing also that it ensures competition and efficiency in the use of high-speed network. It is still early to take stock, but honestly, we are happy with the first outcomes, and we can clearly see that the best is yet to come. Let me share with you some of the results of this process with our latest figures and how the entry of new operators is helping us to reach pre-pandemic traffic levels. Compared to June 2019, on the Madrid-Barcelona-France line, we are now at 70% of the traffic we had before the pandemic. The most incredible data is how the liberalization has boosted this high-speed traffic on the Madrid-Barcelona line. It has increased by 192% between April and June 2021, that is from the start of Ouigo operations. This more than doubles the average increase of the other lines. This triple traffic clearly indicates that thousands of citizens have been drawn to high speed thanks to the liberalization and, of course, the better rates available. This is a success because more traffic means a better use of the network, more income for the company to improve our facilities, and better services to the citizens. Now, to accomplish the full potential of this liberalization process, we need to solve the existing bottlenecks, especially in stations like Madrid-Chamartín and Barcelona-Sants, where a larger capacity is also required for boarding passengers and stationing trains. We are deploying ambitious reforms to restructure rail traffic in our 2 largest capitals, and we have projects to act decisively in other cities. This is our current main priority, eliminating bottlenecks and also finalizing some of the corridors currently underway, like the high-speed line to Galicia, which is our northwest corner, that will start operating this year, and also the line to the southeast. The Spanish government, through the Recovery and Resilience Fund, is dedicating part of these European funds to accomplish these works, among many others, to ensure fully completed high-speed corridors that will push to the modal shift that help us to fight climate change and CO2 emissions. This goal and the overall policies included in the Sustainable Development Goals are the foundations of ADIF's new strategic plan that is based on 4 main pillars: safety, service, sustainability, and results orientation. We in ADIF are currently experiencing one of the biggest transitions. Successfully completing the market opening will entail a significant adaptation effort. But we are very proud of our accomplishments so far. I think our liberalization is a fair and a successful model that is drawing new customers to high-speed rail, that is offering better rates that make this clean and efficient mode of transport more affordable. We hope that the Spanish liberalization will help others to find ways to boost the railway transportation. We kindly invite you to bet decisively on actions that help European passengers and goods to hop on the train. It has been a difficult but exciting journey for us liberalizing this market. Let me finish by thanking again the European Commission and our host, Portugal, for this invitation. We are here on the occasion of the Year of Rail. what a great initiative to highlight that railways mean and will mean in the future. I would like to wish a successful journey to our Connection Europe Express that departs within a few hours and will be in Spain tomorrow. We will welcome it warmly and join the exciting journey. And the good thing is that we are in this together and our future looks bright. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I should have mentioned that you're very recently appointed, so you grasped the brief very quickly. We have just about 10 minutes to have some question. Let's make it vigorous and stimulate the discussion over the coffee break. And perhaps I could begin with you, Mr. Dominguez, because we heard from Federico Meda about the importance of track access charges. And isn't that the number one factor which drives passenger prices up? How much room for maneuver do you have as the infrastructure manager? What solutions can you propose for the track access? Thank you. And then I'll ask Federico to comment on your.
Yes, it's true. Thank you. Okay, ADIF is in constant communication with operators, and in the last 18 months, in fact, we have done a big effort because we have reduced track access charges due to the pandemic, and even in a very difficult moment for ADIF because of the lower traffic, our incomes fell down, and we had a lot of losses. And we have to have a financial balance. Yes, maybe let me profit the moment to say that now that we have declared railway as a key tool for the Green Deal, for getting the goals of the Green Deal, maybe it's a good opportunity for European Union and for state members to find out, to set a realistic financing model for infrastructure managers, because infrastructure managers will have to manage our network and maintain our network in high quality and, what is more important, safety network. So now in the case of Spain, we have recently signed a financing agreement with the transport minister. So we assure funds for the next 4 years, but logically they are looking for some KPIs we have to accomplish, and to accomplish them, to get them, we need financing. So at the end, it goes back to track charges access. So it's not easy, of course, but we are constantly speaking with operators to get it.
I'm sure you are. And what do you hear about that, Federico, from an operator perspective about the track access charges? You raised.
Well, I would say the track access charges are one of the main costs for a train operating company. And so these have a direct impact at the end of the chain on the ticket prices. I repeat something that I told you during the speech. I think that the track access charges have to be sustainable and have to be calibrated on the basis of the ability to pay of the market. And of course, we have to cover all the costs, at least the major part of the cost of the infrastructure manager. But the most important point from my point of view is that, I repeat, something that happened in Italy. For example, the reduction of 5-10% the track access charges, the volume has increased, the volume of trains running has increased of more than 10%. So at the end of the story, the revenues been higher for the infrastructure manager than before.
An interesting way to grow the pie, perhaps. And staying with you, if I could ask, in the Milan-Rome trip is now not very expensive. How do you make that line profitable? How are you striking that balance? What's your magic ingredient here?
Well, there is not a magic ingredient. I would say there are multiple factors acting in order to make each connection we operate profitable. As a private company, we always have to be profitable. I would say the productivity, so the fact to make the most with the available resources. Just to give you an example, each train of our high-speed fleet operates more than 600,000 kilometers per year. It's one of the highest mileage You can find all over the world. Cost efficiencies and optimized cost structure, of course, with safety constraint, respecting all the rules that we need to apply. Another important point is accurate segmentation of the market, because it is important to fix the right pair or the right segment of demand all over, along all the loading curve of the train. And the last but not least, the ticket prices set taking into account the cost of the company on one hand, and on the other hand, the volumes guaranteed by the market. And above all, managed on day-by-day basis in order to catch all the single small opportunity that the market can guarantee to you.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. Can I turn now to Helen on this question of affordability from your perspective? And you talk very interestingly about easy and what we go doing at the end of the month. But I mean, let's be very frank. And as a happy and frequent user, Thalys doesn't always feel very affordable for the general public. So is it essentially restricted just to business travelers? Is that your segmentation of the market and European Commission official? And how do you move out of that constraint? Or do you do that by going through the easy WeGo?
Well, I think that the example of WeGo in Spain is a very good example of what could be done on other subsidiaries, on other trains, and Paris Brussels is one of the examples. And I think that the crisis that we are going through now in all Europe, and business travelers are not so many, and this obliges everyone to think about the model of the business. And what we did in Spain was to come with a very good product, which meets as well the expectations of business travelers. We don't have only people who go and visit their family, and or people who go to the beach for the day. We also have on Madrid-Barcelona, you know that Madrid and Barcelona are two big capitals, two economic capitals in Spain, and many people take the train to go to work and make business. And
great.
And this is great. And so I think that there is a model that we have in SNCF which could be used in other destinations. And what our colleague from Italo said, that the most important is to work on our operating costs in order to offer very attractive prices on every destination.
Thank you very much. I mean, maybe to bring Jorge Esteros into this conversation, and I'd like you to comment on this afterwards, both Helen and Isabel. It's very interesting to hear about ADIF's framework agreements, but doesn't the approach of ADIF in terms of a fixed package approach essentially meaning we're just setting the market share for our market? Isn't that kind of problematic in terms of allowing the market to develop?
Okay, this model of competition was based on the previous study of the market, analyzing the capability of different companies to assure the service, the experience in other corridors in Europe, the number of different competitors, even in other modes. The most important national relation in Spain, the Madrid-Barcelona one, in the air mode, there are only really. So, and of course, analyzing what was the capacity of the line, the different lines to have these services. Indeed, at this moment, the bottlenecks of the capacity are in the state, not in the line. No? So, in the future, when we will solve this problem of capacity station in Barcelona, of course, there will be an additional capacity open for them.
Thank you. What do you think about this?
Well, we are very happy of the way things were structured, and I like to thank ADIF for the way it was led, because capacity is 65% higher than before. And there were many candidates. So it was quite difficult, I understand, from the infrastructure manager point of view, to have fair criteria. And this way of opening the market permitted to have a robust operation. And we have the proof. We've been operating for nearly 4 months, and operations are robust because things were done in order, were done in transparency, and it was fair. So we are very happy with the system. And I think that the market share is as well can be attained and obtained through the capacity you put on the track. I mean, our policy will be to have double trains and to offer many places, many seats, up to 1,000 seats on each train. So I think that the market share is not a problem. There will be a lot of offer, and the Spanish client will have choice, and this is the most important choice, quality and prices. That's we go.
Maria Luisa, and then the final word, Federico. So what's your perspective?
Well, before making this decision, of course, we spoke with all operators interested in the opening market and with the regulator. And we have to think that for operators is an important and complicated business because they have to invest a lot of money. So I think a system in which you assure 10 years of capacity, I think is strong as Helen says, and I think that why it was so successful for us was great to see that 6 different operators were interested in the packages we have prepared. I think that was demonstrated that, in fact, we had made the best decision.
Yeah. Last word to you, as listening to this. Do you fancy a crack at the Spanish market? Do you fancy a crack at the Spanish market, having heard about this?
I don't understand the question.
Sorry. Would you be interested in competing in the Spanish market?
I think there are already 3 actors, and or there will be 3 actors, and I think that it is enough for a market. But let's see in the future. I don't close any door at the moment.
Fantastic. You've been a wonderful panel, and I think we could have talked for an hour on these different issues. I think we've learned a lot from the different success stories. We've learned a lot about it is possible to think about competition in the market in different ways. We can offer our citizens sustainable, competitive, and affordable alternatives to more polluting modes. There can be competition both in the market and for the market. 2 comments, if I may. One is, I think, early days for all of us as we learn how to use these new tools. And secondly, we have to adjust in the post-pandemic situation and adjust quickly to make sure that customers are getting what they need. But it'd be great to meet up again in a year at a time and see how we're doing. Now, we need to stop because we have to admit it. The reason we all want to go to conferences is not just to listen to the presentations, it's to have a coffee break and to talk to each other, as we haven't been able to do for all of these long, lonely months. It also helps us for the best coffee in Europe. If you're very good, I'm going to give you 10 to 15 minutes. And after that, if you don't know her, Desiree is going around with a broom and she will sweep you back into the room. So please, you have until 5 or 10 past 11 to have coffee, which is served outside. Thank you very much for your attention. Big round of applause for our panel, please. Thank you. Wonderful. Then how do I talk? I'll see how it goes. Thank you very much.
You can also always speak there, but this should work very well.
Sorry. Who goes first? But first we have Claudia. She knows.
So first, invite everyone, Claudia, and so on to sit. And once they've sat, then you first Claudia, invite them to the back. And then Matthias here. But they don't go to the podium.
Please tell Cecile not to go to the podium. She's the first one.
Okay. I mean, we can just.
Hello, folks. Let's get the train back on time. If you could all take a seat now, thank you very much. The train's leaving the station. The Connecting Europe Express is about to go. Definition of an optimist: a moderator who says, let's have a 15-minute coffee break. Welcome back, everybody. Could I invite, as you can see, we've adjusted the format of the stage. We're going even more interactive than we were just a moment ago. And could I invite our next group of panelists, Cécile Delaporte-Lazare, Matthias Rütter, Jonas Deister, Shampa Magesh, Angela Di Fabraro, please, to join us on the stage. If we could have Cécile and Matthias here, please. Jonas and Shampa here on the left. Thank you very much. Welcome back. During the first part of today's conference, we've looked at the current state of play of the EU's high-speed network, which infrastructure we have, what remains to be done to complete it, and how we can maximize its utility by combining high-speed rail services with conventional rail. We've talked about some interesting success stories, which can serve as inspiration for policymakers when designing their future plans. We've also heard from the Portuguese Transport Minister as long ago as last October in launching the Portuguese National Investment Programme for 2030. Now, of course, connecting the two largest cities in Portugal to the Spanish high-speed network, cutting the travel time between Lisbon and Porto by half, this new connection has the potential to completely revamp Portuguese mobility in the future. We're going to hear a bit more about that now, and perhaps I could invite to the podium Mr. Carlos Fernandes, Vice President of Infrastructures de Portugal, the Portuguese Infrastructure Manager, to present to us today this flagship project. Carlos, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. I have just a few words in Portuguese and then I switch to English for my presentation. Gostava de agradecer este convite. É de facto um prazer grande em estar aqui hoje. Em primeiro lugar, porque temos a oportunidade de apresentar um projeto absolutamente extraordinário, um projeto extraordinário para Portugal, que pode efetivamente alterar totalmente a forma como nos deslocamos e dar um impulso enorme, gigantesco, àquilo que é o nosso sistema ferroviário. Portanto, em primeiro lugar, um prazer muito grande em estar aqui a apresentar um projeto que é de facto extraordinariamente importante para o país. Em segundo lugar, por estar aqui presencialmente e por marcar esta conferência também a demonstração de que estamos a conseguir ultrapassar esta crise e que rapidamente poderemos voltar à nossa vida normal. Portanto, muito obrigado pelo convite e eu irei então passar para inglês. My presentation will be about the future high-speed rail link between Lisbon, Porto, and Vigo, which should provide a very competitive rail link between Lisbon and the north of Galicia in Spain, a region home to more than 9 million people. Portugal is currently implementing the most ambitious railway investment program in many decades. The main objective of this program is to increase the capacity and competitiveness of rail transport in our international railway corridors connecting to Spain and Europe. With the completion of this investment plan, scheduled for 2023, Portugal will more than double its current railway capacity and reduce the cost of goods transport by rail on connections to Spain between 30% and 50%. The plan also provides for the expansion of the electrified rail network from the current 65% to 85%, and the installation of electronic signaling compatible with RTMS in 30% of our rail network. In 2024, also because of this investment, the main Portuguese railway corridors will be able to accommodate freight trains up to 750 meters long. So, after the conclusion of the current investment plan, the major constraint in our national railway system will be the Northern Line. The Northern Line is about 336 kilometers long, connecting the two main Portuguese cities, Lisbon and Porto, and is used by more than 700 trains a day. Indeed, 44% of all passenger trains and over 90% of all freight trains use this infrastructure every day. Thus, the main problem this infrastructure experiences is the level of congestion, especially near the main urban centers of Lisbon, Coimbra, and Porto, making it impossible to increase the number of trains either for passenger or for goods. The solution to this problem requires the construction of a new railway line. The second main issue is the lack of competitiveness in terms of travel time. Currently, the trip between Lisbon and Porto takes almost 3 hours and is not competitive when compared to flying or using a private vehicle. Even the bus involves journey times similar to those of the train. The modal share of rail passenger transport on this corridor reflects this reality. The train has a share of around just 2%. The resolution of this problem requires the construction of a new high-speed line in this corridor. The new planned high-speed line between Lisbon and Porto will be passenger only, aiming to connect Lisbon to Porto in 1 hour 15 minutes, and will serve the main cities on the corridor at its current central station: Porto, Aveiro, Coimbra, Leiria, and Lisbon. The construction is planned in 3 phases. In the first phase, by 2028, the Porto Source section will be built, allowing the Lisbon-Porto travel time to be reduced to 2 hours. In the second phase, by 2030, the connection between Sor and Carregado will be built, reducing the journey time to approximately 1 hour 17 minutes. The section between Carregado and Lisboa on the Northern Line will be quadrupled by 2028, allowing the construction of the high-speed section to be postponed until after 2030. The situation on the Porto-Vigo link is very similar. The current single-line connection is close to capacity and is not competitive in terms of journey time. A journey of about 160 kilometers takes 2 hours and 22 minutes. The construction of this link is also planned in 3 phases. In the first phase, the section between Braga and the border at Valença will be built at the same time as the connection between Vigo in Spain and the Portuguese border. After the conclusion of this phase, the travel time between Porto and Vigo will be reduced to 1 hour. In the second and third phases, connection will be built between Porto and Sá Carneiro Airport and between Airport and Braga, thus ensuring an integral high-speed link between Porto and Vigo, with an estimate time of around 50 minutes. In the development of this planning phase of the new infrastructure, 4 main issues were raised. First, what should the design speed be? Variable, adjusted to territory, and allowing the train to be competitive to other modes. And second, to build a new line only for passenger or for mixed traffic, only for passengers, based on a specialization strategy and capacity maximization. Third question, development as a new standalone network or as a complement to the existing network. Clearly, an extension of the existing network, maximizing benefits for the rest of the rail network. And finally, which stations and where should they be located? In densely populated areas and, whenever possible, using existing central stations. On this last slide, taking the city of Oporto as example, it's possible to access the impressive effect that the construction of this new infrastructure will have in reducing journey times until 2030 throughout the entire Portuguese territory, but also in international connection to the north of Spain. The length of the lines are proportional to the travel time. For example, in addition to the reduction from 3 hours to 1 hour 17 minutes for journeys between Lisbon and Oporto, we can observe a reduction of 3 hours on the travel time between Porto and Coruña in the north of Galicia, from 5 hours 30 minutes to 2 hours and 30 minutes. This new high-speed rail connection will enable a revolution in mobility throughout the Iberian corridor, serving more than 9 million inhabitants. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Carlo. That was extremely interesting. And one thing I can absolutely guarantee you is that whatever the outcome of the new network connecting Vigo with Lisbon, it's going to be quicker than cycling it, I promise. Before we start our next panel, well, let me say 1 or 2 words of welcome on this. The sustainable and smart mobility strategy calls, as you probably know, for the doubling of high-speed rail traffic by 2030. It's tripling by 2050. Building or upgrading new infrastructure alone will not do the trick, as we've been discussing already this morning. We need to attract more passengers. How do we do so? By making sure our services are attractive, high capacity, high quality. In that respect, digitalization and automation offer a unique opportunity to further increase capacity on the network to offer better services to passengers in terms of easy ticketing options, in terms of service reliability and accessibility. And so that's what this group of highly distinguished people have gathered here today to discuss. How can digitalization make high-speed rail services more attractive to passengers? But before we unleash them, we thought it would be interesting to hear a representative of the next generation of rail users and drivers. And so I'd like to welcome Claudia Gonçalves Pinto to share her views on how rail services should look in the future, and particularly on these digital elements. Claudia is a former trainee from the Committee of the Regions. She was very involved in the preparations of the Next Stop podcast series in the European Year of Rail. And if you haven't yet listened to those, I warmly invite you to do so. Claudia, give us a blast from your trumpet on how rail services should be in the future. Over to you.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, dear participants, as Matthew was saying, I'm Claudia, and I'm here on behalf of the Spring 2021 trainees of the European Committee of the Regions, and thank you for the invitation. Just to give you the overview, at the COR, each semester the trainees are invited to implement their own project, and we chose to do a podcast, Next Stop, on the European Year of Rail, and we chose this subject because we wanted to raise awareness among young people to sustainable modes of transport. So our journey gave us the opportunity to engage with the different stakeholders acting within the railway sector. So I'll include here a few takeaways as to how to make high-speed trains more attractive to young people. And the first and main issue we want to raise is affordability. While we see as a positive development the existence of low-cost train services such as Easy or Ouigo, like we heard here today, these are still an exception to the rule and just not yet a reality to a lot of people in Europe. For example, for me to come from Guimarães, a city in the northwest of Portugal, to Lisbon to be with you today takes approximately the same time by train as by bus, but it can cost up to twice as much. And to go from Lisbon to Brussels, where the European Commission is, by train would take more than a day, several transfers, and cost hundreds of euros. Now, of course, Brussels is a bit far away, so we can start right here in the Iberian Peninsula with realistic connections and affordable connections between the main cities of Portugal and Spain. After all, young people, they first start traveling regionally and nationally before venturing out into the unknown. And then we can offer alternatives that can effectively replace short-haul flights. The European Commission could be more motivated in supporting young people when traveling by train. Taking the idea of an association we interviewed in our podcast, Erasmus by Train, the European Commission could provide each Erasmus student with train tickets to and from their exchange location. Like Erasmus by Train, we also see this as an opportunity to promote trains among young people, as well as meet the goals of the Erasmus program of being both greener and more inclusive. Another suggestion would be expanding the Discover EU scheme to all 18-year-olds in Europe. Now, we all know here that the European Year of the Rail is an opportunity like no other to showcase the benefits of trains to our communities, to the climate, and to European cohesion. So to attract young people, be it to travel by train more often or to choose railway sector careers, needs to come hand in hand with a modernization of the sector. Now this means flexible and harmonized ticketing platforms, providing Wi-Fi as a standard, ensuring access to people with disabilities, and easier connections between the modes of transport for smoother door-to-door traveling. So one of the most important things we learned with this project is that this isn't about telling people to switch off the car key or to not go to the airport this time. This is about providing the sufficient infrastructure, both physical and digital, that can make these connections a real alternative. We also learned that trains have by far the lowest external costs in comparison to other transport modes, but somehow this isn't reflected in the EU approach to charging and financing infrastructures. So maybe this is something that the EU can also address as part of the green transition. Lastly, we just wanted to leave the message that with hard work, commitment, and cooperation between all stakeholders, anything is possible. When there is a will, there is a way, and that also applies to make high-speed trains the anchor of sustainable and green mobility. Thank you.
Well, if you're not inspired by that confident and brilliant presentation, nothing will inspire you. Thank you very much indeed. That was wonderful. And I'm going to ask you to comment afterwards on what you're about to hear. So let's move to our panel discussion and recall the guiding question. How can we make digitalization enable high-speed rail to be more attractive to passengers. And let's start with five letters which are, I'm sure, engraved on your heart, as they are on mine. ERTMS. A key factor of this equation, indeed its deployment, must contribute to the increased capacity and to the higher levels of safety, reliability, punctuality we've been talking about. Paris-Lyon is a real live example of the benefits of ERTMS, and we're very lucky to be joined by Ms. Cécile Delaporte-Lazare, who's Director of Operational Performance and Innovation in SNCF Réseau, and she's going to comment on it. And we're also delighted to have with us the European Coordinator for ERTMS, well known to many of us in DG Move, to provide us with an overview of ERTMS deployment at the European level. So over to you guys for 5 minutes each to pitch on how ERTMS is going to deliver. Cécile, you go first.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. First of all, when we are talking about attractiveness, it is essential that you have a service before being attractive. It has to exist. How can you do that? First, in one hand, you have to ensure interoperability between the national railway system, and in the other hand, you have to ensure safety through single European signaling system and speed control. And those two conditions are fulfilled through ERTMS, and that's the reason why this digital block is absolutely necessary to our attractive network that we dealing with high-speed offers. When it exists, and we talk about the 1,000 kilometers of high-speed line equipped with ERTMS sooner this morning, if you want to be attractive, you have to allow trustable services. And that is to say, three things. The first one, with ERTMS, you save time because you allow to increase speed. And we talk about the time this morning. We show how this time from city to city is important to take market shares. So this speed is a key factor. And if you take the example of the line that is between Paris to Bordeaux, when you run with ERTMS, you go faster. You can go up to 320 kilometers per hour. Whereas if you drive with the national TVM system, you drive up to 300. So thanks to ERTMS, you go quicker, you increase your speed, and so you reach a market. Second point, ERTMS provides service punctuality because it allows a better traffic management through digitalization. And that's why this digital block is really an important issue, because we are connecting different digital blocks of our system. And when it goes all connected, it allows the information to go quickly and clean-sighted. And that allows really efficient decision-making, whereas traffic management is concerned. And the third issue for me that allow attractiveness, that enhance attractiveness of high-speed services thanks to ERTMS, is that you better the capacity. We heard a lot about this morning, so I'm going to the example, the French example was taken in the French line, where thanks to ERTMS we will have no more 13, but 16 trains per hour and per direction, so that's a 25% increase. So yes, the answer is yes, definitely. The digitalization with ERTMS make high-speed service more attractive.
Thank you very much indeed, Cécile. I'm delighted, relieved to hear that ERTMS is important. Matthias, how are we doing? A
You
terrible pause.
make me pause. I was going to start off by saying a few decades ago, we were pushing the ERTMS, and at the same time, we were all talking about the inevitable decline of railways. And we are in a very, very different situation now. We're in a situation where, to a certain extent, rail is becoming the most innovative, most modern, and hopefully also most competitive mode of transport in the 21st century. And ERTMS is part of that, and Cécile has already been saying a lot about it. It is like the play from Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot. We were waiting for ERTMS much too long. We have perhaps also been much too prudent in terms of pushing ERTMS forward, but I can give you some figures now in terms of where we stand. We have now something like 10, ERTMS, as you all know, is separated in GSMR and ETCS. I think the one that we most focus on now in the discussions is the ETCS, the European Train Control System. And there we have some 10,000 kilometers in Europe deployed with ETCS. We have been actually doing quite a lot of work in terms of trying to understand where the investment plans of a lot of infrastructure managers are going. And I'm very happy to say that what we know, we will be at 80,000 kilometers by 2040. 80,000 kilometers by 2040. And in reality, if we do another 20,000 on top of that, in reality, we can get to the objective of the Trans-European Network switches in 2050 already by 2040. And in reality, ERTMS was at the beginning pushed very much as a system to ensure interoperability, allow competition, that type of thing. But we are moving away from this interoperability to seeing that ERTMS is actually the single European system. This is where we're going to, where we will be phasing out the national systems, the Class B systems, and be having one European system, which is ERTMS. And this will, to a certain extent, allow us also, because we're working on the innovation side with modularity and all the rest, this will allow us also to evolve the system in a very different way. We are talking all about automatic train operations. Without ERTMS, that's not possible. We're talking about 5G. We're talking about satellite positioning. All these things will be coming over the next years in terms of rail. So we are living through a very exciting time. And I'm in a lucky position. I didn't think I would be in that when I accepted to become a coordinator. I'm in a lucky position to see that you have all guys have been working on that for quite a long time. And there's now the fruit to be harvested, and we're harvesting it together. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Well, don't go away, because I want to ask you a couple of questions. But going back to you, Cécile, for a moment, in terms of the French history lesson, in terms of ERTMS deployment, you've got a lot of infrastructure managers here today, online, hear this in the room. What lessons do you learn, the good and the bad, from the French deployment that you'd like people to remember? Maybe Matthias to remember too as we go forward. What would you, the particular lessons you'd like people to remember?
I would say that the good lessons I'll talk about just 5 minutes ago, so I will not go on that. And I will focus on the more difficult side of ERTMS. We are dealing with, for me, there is 3 main lessons that I would like to share with you, and particularly with the infrastructure manager.
If you mind, yes.
So ERTMS can be fragile, it is expensive, and it is very complex. And as you asked me a very short answer, I'll just focus on the last points, this complexity. We are talking about connecting the different digital blocks. And you were talking about ATO and put in perspective that is going much further. The more you connect those blocks, the difficult it gets to understand how the information goes and how it works. So when you, infrastructure manager, buy an ERTMS block, you have to go and understand how it works, and not only what it does, but how it does. You need a deep understanding on what is going on, so that the representation you have is not under state, but is really formally expressed. Otherwise, safety is at stake, and human capacity to accept this system too.
Okay. Well, turning to Matthias, so you've explained very clearly how complexity is the big outstanding problem or the outstanding lesson. And I'm going to challenge Matthias because I used to work for him, and in many ways I feel I still do. So, Matthias, you cited Samuel Beckett and Waiting for Godot. And if I recall right, at one point in that play, one of the guys says to the other, "Do you think he's coming?" As they wait and they wait. And you very confidently predicted, and you're on the record now, Matthias, for predicting 80,000 kilometers by 2040. And given this complexity, why should we believe you now?
Well, I think there are a number of elements which lead me to think that if we were to bet on that, I would win the bet. First of all, we have the money. Look at the recovery and resilience facilities, look at the Connecting Europe facility too, look at structural funds, look at EU Invest, but also look at national money. I think we have the money, which was missing. Second, I think we have a much better experience in terms of how to do so. And one thing I would wanted to say to Cecile, to a certain extent, I'm witnessing that infrastructure managers are becoming digital companies. ERTMS is actually driving the restructuring of rail companies as well, because they realize that they have to do things differently. So that's the second. I think the third thing is clearly that we have the structures in place. Hopefully, we also have the people and the resources to do so, to have a much more centralized approach with the European Rail Agency. It has become a one-stop shop. It is actually authorizing the vehicles. It will authorize the public procurement. Joseph, who's sitting in the audience, will have a lot of work to do, and is doing, at the moment, is doing quite a lot on that. And I think it needs the sufficient resources, but I think we can do that. And then I look across the Atlantic to the US. The US mandated a system not as sophisticated and not as good as ours, which is called positive train control, but they mandated it. They mandated it, and within 8 years, they had deployed it. We, I think, also have not only to do the carrot, but also the stick approach, more on ERTMS, which means that new locomotives who are coming on the market all have to be equipped with ERTMS. We need to make sure that Class B systems are being phased out, and perhaps we even have to have a mandatory deadline in terms of actually deployment of ERTMS. Last point, we are beginning to crack the problem of regional traffic, because you are quite rightly saying it's so expensive. But we have, to a certain extent, the Swiss have done it, perhaps not the way we would do it now, with limited supervisions. We have approaches which can allow us, in a cheap way, also to have ERTMS on regional lines, which means that in the end, we will have this one system where you can run with a locomotive from Tallinn to Porto, if the gauge is right, without having to change the different signaling system. So I'm optimistic.
Ever optimistic. I'm sure, be talking about ERTMS on the train to see if it works and to see I'm sorry we don't have more time to discuss this, but thank you both. Let's turn to the next block of discussion about the passenger experience, which we heard about already from Claudia, ticketing and passenger rights. Another key factor in this equation, if we want to attract more people to rail, we need to offer them an excellent consumer service in terms of punctuality, reliability, affordability, and of course, passenger protection when things go wrong. We have briefly to mention new rules on rail passenger rights, which entered into force in June, and they are, of course, a big step in the right direction, including a legal obligation for railway undertakings to offer long-distance and regional services under the form of a through ticket, giving increased protection, shortens pre-notification periods, and requesting infrastructure managers to provide real-time dynamic traffic and travel information. And last but not least, we have put in place EU-wide common reimbursement and compensation forms, allowing passengers to more efficiently claim their rights in the event of problems. So to discuss all this, it's great to have with us today, firstly, Mr. Jonas Deister, Managing Director of Socialhelden and the project coordinator of Elevate, integrating the real-time data of the elevators of more than 3,300 German train stations to improve barrier-free mobility. And the passenger experience, of course, also includes the booking itself. In aviation, with one click, you can book multiple connections. This is not yet the case for railways, and so it's great to have with us today also Ms. Champa Magesh, Senior Vice President of Trainline, who are, of course, a pioneer when it comes to digital ticketing in the rail sector. So to hear about these different aspects, let's turn first to Jonas for your pitch, if I may. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. So I'm working for a non-profit organization. We're called Social Heroes, and I've got a lot of colleagues with a disability. And so when I travel with my colleagues in Germany, it's often, pardon me, like a really pain in the ass to go train other sorts of mobility. So for example, in Germany, if you want to book a wheelchair accessible place in an ICE, you need to call a hotline. And you need to do this 48 hours before departure. So like spontaneous traveling is not reality in Germany. Also like online, you cannot see whether there's a wheelchair accessible place available in the train. So you really always need to call this landline and ask for it. So spontaneous driving isn't there. Digitalization is on the way, obviously, but it takes a time. And what we see is that everything what, with regards to people with disabilities, for example, is low priority often in the companies that deal with it. And I mean, we talk about sustainability, and sustainability also has a social dimension, and we shouldn't forget that we create mobility for people to connect people, and we shouldn't forget about this group of people who doesn't have a good lobby. So this is our mission, to strengthen mobility, and you already mentioned our project Elevate, which deals about real-time information of elevators. Because if an elevator is broken, you might not be able to access the platform or leave it. So what we do is we digitalize elevators. So we work with manufacturers and we ask them for the real-time information so we can include them in our own online services like wheelmap.org, which is the world's biggest online platform for accessible places. And so you can always check whether an elevator is working or not. And we're also providing an API so other mobility as a transport services can include this information to their own services.
Thank you very much, Jonas. I'm just been told that apparently if you hold with two hands, it interferes. So with one hand, when you speak again, thank you. I'm learning a lot about microphones today. Over to you, Champa, if I may, to have your say on this issue.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to be here. Is this one hand? Okay, great. Clearly, I need an instruction manual for this. So, as Matthew mentioned, I'm here representing Trainline. And for those of you who might not be aware, Trainline is an independent rail platform and a digital ticket retailer. And I listened with great interest to what Claudia had to say in terms of what customer expectations are for rail travel, particularly in terms of the younger generation. And it very much syncs up with what we find that consumers across all of our markets, I mean, we sell rail and coach tickets across 45 markets. And what we're hearing is sort of four pillars, really. Consumers are looking for choice. And we heard that very much in what Claudia was talking about. More importantly, value. And we heard that from everything many people have said in terms of price points. But let's not forget ease. And I think it goes to some of the points you made about assisted travel, or how we can make rail more accessible. And finally, a theme that we've all been talking about that I think should be great news for all of us, that consumers are concerned about sustainability, although they don't necessarily, and this is a problem for us in the industry, equate rail travel with sustainability. So that's clearly a problem we need to solve. Now, how can we achieve all of this for our consumers? And many of you have been talking about some of the things that will help achieve this: more high-speed rail capacity, liberalization competition, air rail substitution initiatives, great price point, good service. All of this matters, but it's not build it and they will come. And we know this from other industries. So if there is one point I ask you to take away from what I'm going to say, that is, please do not forget the innovation that we need to drive in retailing and distribution. We need to put rail on the shelf where consumers are making that decision. And they're not making the decision at your railway stations as they used to before. They are making that decision on WhatsApp, on social media. They're making the decision on blogs and vlogs. So the purchase decision is through digital channels, and therefore do not forget the role that independent retailers and distribution platforms are making. And for that to happen, I think there are four barriers that I would like, and I encourage, and Matthew, you encourage us to talk about the real issues in the industry today, and there are significant barriers to rail distribution and rail retailing. And the first one is really around the level playing field, which means we need to give equal access to fares and real-time data to rail retailers and distributors. We need fair and viable remuneration so more independent retailers can invest in innovation. And finally, we need to make sure that the contractual terms don't restrict independent retailers to compete commercially. So I think if we can address all of that, then together we can help make happen what we've all been talking about, which is modal shift and utilization of the amazing high-speed rail capacity.
Both, that was absolutely brilliant, and reflecting two different but vitally important facets of the problem. Here's your free chance to criticize the Commission and the European Union. We've been working very hard, we think, to encourage the development of ticketing solutions. We've been working very hard, of course, with our partners in the Council, the Parliament, to improve passenger rights in the case of delays and shortages of train connections and accessibilities. So my question to both of you is, what more should we be doing? In a way, you've both said it already, but what more should we be doing, and how do we overcome the political resistance which is out there? Because I think we all in this room want to see more traveler-friendly distribution of rail travel services. Why did you go first, Jean?
Thank you for that. I think, we talk about passenger rights, and it's very important. And the question is, how do we translate the passenger rights into something that passengers can access digitally and can be automated and can be seamless, which reduces friction? So, for example, in France, we've introduced Recoup Retard, which brings the passenger rights for delay compensation to life, really. Passengers don't want to be filling up forms. If the train is delayed, they want an alert that says you're entitled to compensation, click one button. But then, of course, as a rail operator, you don't want fraud to come in. So you need fraud capabilities, you need multiple payment capabilities. So when we think about passenger rights or regulation, we need to think about all of the commercial elements in retailing that can be automated. And I think where I would encourage the Commission to be thinking about is, as you think about competition in high-speed rail capacity, how can you encourage competition and innovation in retailing and distribution, which allows passenger rights to become digitalized and easily accessible. And that's where I mentioned the barriers that exist today, where historically, rail distribution has been seen something that rail carriers alone control. And now we need to democratize that and bring in more investment and more specialist innovation into that area.
Jonas, you're working in a very specific area of this. Would these kinds of solutions that Champa is advocating work for you? Is that what we need to be doing?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there are a lot of synergies, and I mean, I totally share your views. And just to be more specific on the field of accessibility, because I mean, we all know there's a lot of tax money involved in this kind of field. It shouldn't be just optional to be accessible. So even with the TSI, PRM we have in Europe, like train stations with less than 1,000 passengers a day don't have to be accessible, and I don't think that's okay. So every single train station should be accessible, and also trains should have more than 2 wheelchair accessible places. We all might need a wheelchair one day, and we should just, if we do tenders, just should have like very hard criteria when it comes to accessibility. So this is not just about platforms and trains, but also online services. And also, I would like to advertise for more open data. So that transport companies should open up their data, not just about the accessibility status of elevators or the capacity of seats, also which accessible seats, but like in general, this should be like public good, and there can be other things created by the community, by the citizens, what also will make train riding more attractive to many people.
What I find absolutely fascinating from those two answers, and thank you both for them, is that you're coming from very different corners of the problem. One from a sort of a commercialization of the sector, and the other talking about the rights in the sector. But you're both asking for the same thing, which is more digitalization, more open data. Very interesting indeed. Thank you both. I wish we had more time to discuss that. We come to the last in our trio of issues. It's like a tapas menu here with small bite-sized chunks of interesting things. And we're now going to have a one-woman panel to look at the challenges of limited skills and resources, because without rail workers, we will have no rail services. It is indeed an obvious statement, but the reality is less obvious, because the rail sector is facing a challenge of aging. A large share of the workforce will retire in the next 10 years, and it continues to suffer from a gender imbalance. I'm delighted, by the way, that our list of speakers today has not reflected that problem. We've had excellent gender balance, and I'm very pleased about that. At the same time, the transformation of the railway sector, of course, is driven by digitalization and automation. It's going to require new skills and competencies for these staff. Briefly, to say what we've been doing, the Skill Training Alliance for the Future European Rail System, also known as the STAFA project, co-funded by Erasmus, I'm glad to say, gathers together 32 partners from the rail sector, research centers and academia. And so that's working well. But we're going to hear more about that, because we have here the project coordinator, Angela Di Febbraio, who's also professor of transport engineering at the University of Genoa. So, Angela, over to you for your pitch.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here in this important day, important year for the rail. I can remember that already 10 years ago in the transport white paper, rail was identified as a major driver to get, to get a smart, green and sustainable growth, with the idea that rail become the backbone of a completely connected intermodal European transport network. Now, after 10 years, we see that rail is even more recognized as an instrument to go for the target of decarbonization and climate change. We have heard also this morning that the train hold impressive green credential to the other, with respect to the other transport modes. But still, we have a problem, because despite the deep experience and knowledge in rail of the sector and our advanced high-speed networks, today, just about 7% of passengers and 11% of goods travel by rail. This can be attributed mainly to the fact that rail in Europe is often seen as a collection of a fragmented collection of national systems, which makes often the cross-border rail travel an alternative, unreliable, and inconvenient for many with respect to flight. So we know that high-speed rail could make most of the travel throughout Europe shift from skies to the ground, but there is a long way to go. I think that digitalization can greatly help going this way. And in many ways, I like to mention two, just referring to what the previous speakers in this panel have said. First is helping in realizing the single European railway area, the SERA, which will enable the cross-border rail mobility and will facilitate the net for the operators. So we need interoperability, first of all. Second, digitalization could help providing all the functions and the services needed by users today. So going to risks, sorry, I was prepared to speak in standing up, and so I am not used to use this micro. So going to skills and resources, I meant the major transformation process, which is driven by digitalization, but also automation, requires to bring in new skills and competencies. And on the other hand, the sector is experiencing a strong lack of talent, let's say, and a strong need for re-upskilling. So our project, Staffer, is a framework for strategic cooperation among the key stakeholders of the sector. I mean, operators, infrastructure manager, supply industry, and education and institution at a different level, with the aim of establish a key stakeholder called Skills Alliance, which aims at setting up, defining a blueprint, the so-called blueprint strategy to recognize the present and the new skill needs suitably and timely. In this framework, based on the identification of the current and the future skills and competence need for the whole sector, rail sector, suitable and new curricula, education and training curricula will be designed, developed, and validated throughout the continent. So Staffer is expected to deliver human capital solution at all stages in all the different, let's say, levels of the train value chain. And we have gaining, very important, a holistic view of the sector as a system of systems, and with the ambition of overcoming the intrinsic fragmentation of the sector.
Thank you very much indeed, Angela. That's very interesting. My question is the rail sector really going to be attractive enough to get the young people with all their digital skills to go into? We're going to hear from Claudia and her view on this in a moment, particularly women. I mean, the Generation Z or Generation Z. How are we going to get them into the market? And what is your three brief silver bullets?
Thank you for this question. I like it very much. Besides the Staffer, I discussed this topic also with my dear colleagues of the Scientific Committee of Shift to Rail. The sector is more attractive than it was 10 years ago, but still there is a growing lack of the right people with the right background, essentially referring to STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. So Generation Z is the Fridays for Future generation. They like careers and studies for the planet. They are ready to change their mobility habits to help sustainability. And we know that in STEM, with particular reference to STEM, the majority of Gen Z individuals, and I like to underline, especially women, who value to have sustainable employers. So which are the silver points in my mind? First one, I put it in capital letters, communication, because the rail sector is too often seen as closed, conservative, and overregulated. Is it? We need, no doubt, openness. This sector is dominated, in my view, by passion and innovation. So we have to raise the awareness that the sector can offer high-tech job opportunities, not just to engineers, for instance. So concepts like artificial intelligence, digital twin, big data, of course, 5G and then future 6G connectivity are well present in the sector. Second, of course, in my proper field, put new and more contents about modern railways in education, especially in STEM framework curricula. More universities are doing so. We are going to work hard on this on Staffer, but it takes time. We will see the results in next years. And third, again, give the sector a real international dimension, because we need young talent, but young talent often feel that the sector doesn't offer so interesting international job opportunities. Just a word to finish. We all know that almost children love trains. So we have to recall that passion in more young adults.